Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the June CNPA Planning Committee meeting. For those members of the public joining us today, I am Russell Jones, the convener of the CNPA Planning Committee. Today's meeting will also be streamed live on the Cairngorms YouTube channel, the Cairngorms YouTube channel. Before we go any further with the meeting, I'm going to ask the clerk to the board to run a roll call.
Sandy Bremner.
Here.
Jackie Bruton.
Here.
Peter Cosgrove.
Here.
Hannah Grist. Here. Russell Jones.
Here.
John Kirk.
Here.
Bill Lobban.
Here.
Lauren McCallum.
Here.
Eleanor McIntosh.
Here.
Fiona McLean.
Here.
Steve Micklewright.
Yeah, I am here.
Duncan Miller.
Here.
Anne Ross.
Here.
Derek Ross.
Here.
Michael Williamson.
Present.
And we have apologies from Jiva Blackett, Kenny Deans and Paul Gibb.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Members, to help move the business forward effectively, please keep your questions succinct and to the point, focused firmly on clarification of technical or planning issues. Once we have moved into the discussion phase of an application, it would be helpful if members could indicate at an appropriate point if you are minded to put forward any proposal regarding the officer's recommendations. Please raise your hand to indicate you want to speak during the meeting. Please make sure your microphones are muted unless you are speaking to ensure premium sound quality on the live stream. Should a member wish to pull together an amendment to the motion on any of the items today, a breakout room is available and the details are on your board memo. You will be joined there by Peter Ferguson. On to matters arising. I have no other matters arising. And item 3, on to declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare an interest on any of the items on the agenda today? If you have an interest to declare, can you please be clear on the item number, nature of the declaration, thinking about under which category of interest within our Code of Conduct your interest sits, e.g. remuneration, related undertakings, contracts, houses, land and buildings, interest in shares and securities, gifts and hospitality received, or a non-financial interest. And also intimate whether you will be taking part in the item or leave. Do any members wish to raise anything? Pete Cosgrove.
Thank you, Convener. I wish to declare an interest on item 4, the application for detailed planning permission for a development at Nethy Bridge. I'm the director of the company that carried out the ecology surveys on the site and have provided advice on the site, and so I'll be taking no further part in the deliberations. I'm going to be leaving the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Pete. Sandy Bremner.
Yeah, I'd like to declare a non-financial interest in item 5, the Upper Dee River and Floodplain Restoration. I'm chair of the River Dee Trust Conservation Charity, which is a supporter of the project, as detailed in the report to the committee. So I'll be leaving the hall for that item.
Okay, thank you, Sandy. Members, move on to today's first application. It's application for detailed planning permission for 35 number residential units and formation of access road and SUDS at land 160 metres south of Linstock Park, Nethy Bridge. The recommendation is to approve subject to conditions. I'm going to hand over to Catherine Donaghy in a second to present this. But also, we will hear after that, we have with us today Andrew Lilly and Ron Lane for the applicants, and we will also hear from Tessa Jones and Pete Crane. But for now, I'll hand over to Catherine. Thank you.
Thank you. Next slide. Sorry, I'm just trying to get the next. I'm not sure if this is this on. Apologies.
That's working.
Right. All right. Okay. Yeah. Apologies. Yes, this is a planning application, as the convener says, for detailed permission for the layout, the plot layout for 35 units formation of access and SADS and landscape layout at Nethy Bridge. It's a full planning permission for that. The details of the houses are not part of this application. It's the plot layout that's been applied for. It's a major application out under the Scottish Government's hierarchy, so there was pre-application consultation with the community carried out on this application. Before I start on the presentation, I just want to draw members' attention to two late representations on the application. One representation came in after the time period for commenting, and that doesn't raise, it's a letter of support, it doesn't raise any new material issues. It relates to highlighting the need for new housing and the reasoning for that in Nethy Bridge, but it doesn't raise anything that isn't covered in the report. We've got another representation from a party who objected to the planning application, and it's a supplementary letter which raises some concerns about the drainage impact assessment and the drainage arrangements, the sustainable and urban drainage basin. It talks about insufficient evidence of the clay content, that it will be impermeable, and that the capacity of the detailed design of the capacity of the SADS basin, and also talks about whether or not there's any dubiety about whether or not the basin sits outside of the flood risk, the flood plain in this case or not. So the writer wanted it brought to the committee's attention so that they were aware of what was considered to be deficiencies in the submission. I'll deal with that under the drainage part of this, and would point out at this stage that there is a planning condition proposed in our recommendation that there should be a fully detailed drainage impact assessment provided. The site is at the southern edge of Nethy Bridge, just at the edge of the settlement there, as you can see. To the left-hand side of the site runs the River Nethy, which is part of the River Spee Special Area of Conservation, and to the right-hand side of the site, with the red line site there, is the Leitich Road, which is a popular walking route, and it's off that road that access is proposed. It's presently an agricultural field used for grazing purposes. There's a number of designated sites in the area, and hence a habitat regulation appraisal was carried out, and that's attached as Appendix 2 and 3 on this for this application. The blue river hatched through the middle of the site is the River Spee, part of the River Spee Special Area of Conservation, designated for Atlantic salmon, lamprey, sea lamprey, freshwater pearl mussels and otter interest. To the west of the site, the left-hand side of the slide, the cross-hatched area, there's the Cairngorm Special Area of Conservation, the Abernethy Forest Special Area of Conservation as well, on a Special Protection Area, apologies. And those sites are designated for habitat interests, but also for capercaillie, osprey and crossbill. And that was all formed part of the habitat regulation appraisal to see if this development would have any impact on those interests. It was concluded that there would be a likely impact from the development, and mitigation is proposed within the habitat regulation appraisal to ensure that there is no adverse impacts on these designated interests. This is the layout of the site. Now, I don't know how well it's showing up here, but on the left-hand side of the slide, there's a kind of lighter green hatched area, and then a darker green dark green area. They're not hatched. And there's a blue line that you might be able to make out running along the top of that lighter green area, and that is the floodplain area. This area is that part of the site, the western part of the site, is designated in SEPA's flood maps as being at risk of flooding. And as a result of that, at the pre-application stage, the applicants went through pre-application advice here. They had a flood risk assessment which helped inform the layout of the site to avoid any development within the floodplain, because national planning policy and our own local development policy says avoidance is the first option. So there's no development proposed within that floodplain. The SADS, and it's shown on all the other drawings, the extent of the floodplain. The SADS basin, which is in the kind of, again, in the right hand, I've got my right and left mixed up there. The right-hand side of the site is in there, the SADS basin, and then you've got a loop road coming round with an access onto Leitich onto Letic Road. The plots are arranged around that loop road, and on the southernmost side of the site, at the bottom of the site there, there's an area that's called the knoll that is out with the site area, which is of interest. It's got wax cap, fungi, etc. on it, which has been highlighted by representations to the application. As a result of that interest, and also the river that bounds the site, the applicants revised the site layout slightly to pull the development, the plots back a little bit from those areas which are out with the site, but they pulled it back a bit so that there would be some sort of as advised by our ecology advisors, so there'd be some sort of a buffer zone, as it were, from that area. You'll see there's some dots, and apologies, they're not the best drawn, but there's some dots running through the site in the top sort of right-hand corner, running down through the middle of the loop road and then up to the Letic Road on the right-hand side. That is the designation in the local development plan. This site is designated for housing in the local development plan. Part of it is, and that part, that sort of rectangular bit, is the bit that's designated for housing. It's designated for 20 units, and the housing development, as you can see there, is out. Part of it is out with of the designation. So this does constitute a departure from the local development plan. So if we're minded to approve it, we've got to give reasons for departing from policy. The relevant policy in this case being the National Planning Framework and our local development plan, which directs development to allocated housing sites. There is, in the corner of that loop, the bottom of the loop, there's a play area proposed, and there's two. It's maybe not showing, it might be show up better in the next slide, but there's two wide corridors of landscaping proposed across the site, running from east to west, and both through the corridor, and then another one, and then at Linstock Park, which is at the top of the site, that's a housing development, at the top of the site, there's already a kind of wayleave of ground there, and the applicants propose to supplement that with a landscaped area there. This is the landscape plan for the site, and it's quite a detailed plan. It's got all the details of the proposed planting, which is native planting, riparian planting down by the river, alongside the knoll area on the right-hand side of the site, the south part of the site. Alongside there's proposal for a sort of hedging there to discourage householders from straying in that direction. That part of the ground of the planting and the planting along the river side is proposed to be delivered as advanced planting. We're recommending a condition that be provided once development starts on site, the idea being that it would then be established before the houses were started being built on the site. Individual applications will be required for all the houses, the individual houses. There's been quite a lot of supporting studies with this application that are outlined in our report. There's an otter species protection plan. There's a householder note, advice note for householders on how to dispose of or to behave responsibly with dogs, and how to avoid disposing of compost, etc., from their garden in a manner that would cause any harm to the surrounding interests in the area. There's biodiversity enhancements proposed on the site by way of this planting, these planted corridors. You see them better there, the two corridors through the middle of the site. They've got rain gardens proposed. They've got bird and bat boxes, and a fairly significant amount of native planting. A mixture of habitats has been proposed as well, and juniper around the edge of the site, and kind of an improved grassland along the edge of the site along Letic Road has been retained, because that's seen of value for biodiversity and wildlife. And down in the left-hand corner of the site, you'll see that big area for the floodplain. There's some trees there that are going to be retained, and in that floodplain area, that land is going to be undisturbed and is available for people in the scheme to walk, to exercise, whatever, and it will be left undisturbed. So there's a large area of ground there as well. This slide kind of shows the house positions are indicative only, but it just gives you an idea of how the site might be developed. The site, There was, I should have mentioned at the beginning, there was obviously there was a site visit for this application. So you'd have seen in the site visit the land slopes up to that knoll on the right-hand side. So the proposal is to dig down that edge at that end of the site that sort of undulates a bit, and to try and create a lower platform which the applicants submit will make the houses at that end of the site sit down lower in the site so they're not sort of sitting up. And these sections just kind of illustrate how the site could be developed with site sections. The soil that will be moved around, there'll be no need to import soil because the soil movements will all take place using existing soil on the site. This is the indicative house type. So the applicant has submitted this information just to give an idea of how you could provide 35 houses on this site. They're showing a mixture of 3, 4 and 5 bedroom houses, but they're simply for illustrative purposes. If individual applications will have to come forward for every plot, and whether it comes forward all at once or on 1 or 2 at a time, we don't know yet. There's a variety of sizes of plots. The lower density towards the right-hand side, the bottom part of the site, lower density there, and maybe higher density nearer the village end of the site of the plots in terms of the sizes. There is a design brief within the design and access statement for this application, and that sets out how some principles for houses to follow, the types of boundaries, avoidance of excessive cut and fill, use of timber, etc. The requirement for affordable housing on this site in Nethy Bridge, according to the local development plan, would be 25% affordable housing. The applicant has put forward a proposal that the affordable housing will all be delivered at another site in Station Road, which members will be aware of, in Nethy Bridge, which recently got planning permission for 21 houses. All those houses, as proposed, will be affordable. So providing the affordable component for that development and providing the 25% for this house, as a result of the increased numbers, there's now going to effectively be an uplift. There'll be the requirement was for 14 houses for both sites, and now the proposal is that 21 will be delivered. So that's an uplift in the affordable housing position. Both sites are under the control of the applicant, so if the application was approved, there would have to be a legal agreement in place to ensure delivery of the sites of the affordable component. This is Lettock Road leading up to the site, and this slide is showing some of the road improvements proposed. When we were on the site visit, the members that were on the minibus pointed out by other members for other members' information, there is some build-outs on the road. They're not raised, but they're kind of build-outs and with a little sort of flat curbing on them. The roads department wanted them removed and the road resurfaced. They felt that that was better, more beneficial for users of the road. The road will be widened for the section coming up to the access point for the development, and a crossing point. There'll be a footpath along the frontage of the development from its access point onto Lettock Road, leading up to the end of the site, and then a crossing point so that it'll cross in and join in with the footpath network going back towards Nethy Bridge. So that'll be the proposal there. Further up, which again members may have noticed on the site visit, as you're approaching Linstock Crescent, which is further up Lettock Road on the right-hand side, there's a wee play area and there's a couple of houses there at that corner, and the roads department have passed that bit of road be either widened or a traffic management scheme put in place to allow the free passage of cars, or the freer passage of cars, because with the extra vehicular transport generated by the new development, they feel that there's a need to just improve that wee bit of road there. So they're suggesting a planning condition to that effect. Now, this is some visualisations the applicant has provided to show how the site might be developed. And at the top one on the left shows as you're coming up Lettock Road, and it's the first sort of the top left one is the first bit. As you're coming up, there's the way leaf at Linstock Crescent, and then the planting that the applicant proposes. So that's coming up the road. Then the next one is further up the road as you reach the first landscaped corridor, and then one on the left at the bottom where the cyclist in the front, that's at the top beside the second landscape corridor, just to show how it could, the landscape setting could form over time. And the visualisation in the bottom right-hand corner just shows how this site from a sort of aerial view. You'll see that wee kind of hammerhead T-shaped bit in the bottom left-hand corner. That's the little access road into the Sads Pond, and the Sads Pond lies beside that. That little access will be down in Grasscrete, so the grass grows up through the gaps, and then that's how the development might develop over time. You can see the little play area at the end of the curve of the road there too, and the River Nethy in the foreground. This is the road network serving the site. This is looking down towards the site. The site's on the right-hand side. You're just coming out of Nethy Bridge there, and you can see those raised curbs that I was talking about. They're not raised, they're kind of flat, but they're taking up the carriageway. You can't drive over them. So that's what the Roads Department wants removed. And then the second slide on the right is looking back down Lettock Road, and you can see the houses on Linstock Park just to the left-hand side there. This is looking south from the Linstock direction, looking across the site to the knoll that I was mentioning earlier. And you can see the tussocky grass, that's the floodplain in the foreground. The slide on the right-hand side is again looking at Lettock Road. You can see the field entrance to the site, the existing field entrance. The new entrance will be a wee bit further nearer the village than that. And then you look up and you see the land just gently rising up to that knoll at the top. So the housing will stop short of that rough grass at the very top. And you can see the areas of juniper at the edge of the site there, which will be all retained. This is a sort of closer version photograph of that knoll area, which sits apart from the site, and the development itself, the boundaries of the plots will be about 7 metres away from that. There'll be an area that's free of any development, then there'll be hedging, a landscape sort of corridor of hedging, then the plots themselves. And the landscape plan illustrates landscaping and tree planting within the plots too. This is just looking across the site towards the woodland, the trees that you can see in the distance. That's along the riparian corridor alongside the River Nethy. This is Linstock Park, the housing at the bottom of the site. And you can see on the left-hand slide, you're looking from the knoll area back down towards Linstock, and to the left, the river, and then looking down, and Linstock Park is just there in the distance. On the right-hand slide is showing there's an existing kind of about 5 metres wide area of land that's just fenced off as a kind of wayleave at the back of the back gardens of the properties in Linstock Park. And then the applicant proposes another 5 metre wide strip of landscaping there, so that there'll be a sort of buffer to the development at Linstock Park. The key issue here is the principle of development. The development is out with the zoning, partly out with the zoning for the local development plan. The applicant has put forward and is summarised in the report the reasons why they've gone out with the designation in order to get a development that will use, you're not left with bits of land stranded, that it will use the whole area. The floodplain area will then be available as open space. There will be more capacity for landscape corridors, and the housing is a more relaxed layout. We are of the view that there is a case for departure from policy, the policy being the National Planning Framework policy and Local Development Plan policy that direct housing to allocated sites. I'm sort of jumping ahead here, but the development of the other points, but the development is otherwise considered to comply with all our local development plan policies, and we believe there is a reason to depart from the policies directing sites, development to allocated sites. The habitat regulation appraisal has been carried out, and it's concluded that the mitigation required here to avoid any adverse impacts on Copper Cayley is that there's open space areas within the site that people can easily exercise their dogs without any sort of disturbance to Copper Cayley, and for short walks, etc. That there's a householder information leaflet will encourage good behaviours and avoid any disturbance to the otter. That there's evidence of otter in the wider area, not in the site itself, but the conditions are proposed on that, and also conditions are proposed by our ecology advisor in terms of the implementation of all the biodiversity requirements and the control of lighting on the site as well. That's all detailed in the habitat regulation appraisal in our landscape and our ecology comments. So we don't believe, subject to the mitigation, and Nature Scott agree with these conclusions, we don't consider that there will be any adverse impacts on the integrity of the designated sites. In terms of landscape and placemaking, the site is, we feel, is very well landscaped. Its corridors, the proposed landscaping will over time provide a very good setting for development for the housing to be sited in amongst. And whilst the plots in the southernmost part of the site are rising, we're satisfied that the sections demonstrate that the houses will sit comfortably in the landscape, and that over time this development will reflect the forest village feel of Nethy Bridge. And that's subject to conditions, as I mentioned earlier, of advanced planting for the areas beside the knoll and beside the riparian corridor. In terms of ecology and biodiversity, the site will deliver an improvement in biodiversity, we believe, in terms of the additional planting, biodiversity enhancements, and also the protection of the areas of interest around the site, which are out width of the site, but they're protected by the measures the applicant has taken in terms of the amendments to their layout. And so we believe that the interests of the protected species, otter, etc., are well delivered protection by the proposed application, and in terms of conditions that we're proposed to be attached. In terms of flooding and drainage, the technical consultees, the flood risk management team of Highland Council and SEPA are both satisfied with this proposal. There was a lot of pre-application discussion about this and where the floodplain, etc., and where the development could be sited. Back to the late comments, the supplementary comments I mentioned earlier, the flood risk management team have asked for a more detailed drainage impact assessment here. They're happy with the principles of the sustainable drainage, the attenuation basin, and with an outflow to the River Nethy. But they're happy with that in principle, but they just wanted a little bit more detail on the actual detail of the outfall and some details of the design, and we're suggesting in condition 10 that we get that further detail. In terms of the points raised by the late representation, it has highlighted the need for full soil investigations to substantiate the proposal that the SADS basin be clay lined, because with clay from the site. Now, it would be normal to expect these site investigations to come in with a fully detailed drainage impact assessment, but if members are minded, we would suggest adding that to the planning condition number 10 that talks of the information that's required, to make it absolutely explicit that we do expect that information, but we would expect it to come in anyway. The flood risk team are satisfied with the information as it stands in general terms, that we can deliver a drainage solution for this site, and that the flood risk area, which is another concern of the late representation, that the flood risk area has been fully considered and that the SADS infrastructure is out with that flood risk area. So on that basis, the consultees are satisfied subject to conditions. In terms of transport, I mentioned earlier some of the issues that the Roads Department had raised, and these can all be addressed by planning conditions. The site is well located in terms of in relationship to the village. It's within easy walking distance of the facilities of the village. Children can walk to school along the existing path network. A number of representations raised concern about there not being a dedicated cycleway and footpath for people to get to the school. That's not possible within the confines of the existing road layouts within Nethy Bridge, and it's out with the gift of the applicant to provide an off-site path through woodland or whatever, and the roads department are satisfied with the arrangements, and that also that cyclists already share surfaces in Nethy Bridge, which is within the speed limit. So we don't feel there's a particular issue in that respect. In terms of affordable housing delivery, I've mentioned that earlier, that that's been provided off-site and that it complies with policy, providing we get a legal agreement tying that up. Developer obligations is covered in our report. The settlement statement for Nethy Bridge identifies that this site should provide a contribution to strategic community facilities. That's been discussed with the development plans team in Highland Council, who comment for developer obligations, and they've provided a suggestion of a sum of money per house that should go towards community facilities. Highland High Life have been asked about whether there is community facilities that this could be directed to, and it was agreed that the most appropriate was as identified in the Community Action Plan in Nethy Bridge itself. The applicant is is agreeable to that, and so we would propose that there should be part of legal agreement to delivery of those developer obligations. In terms of cultural issues, we understand from the Council Archaeology team that there was in this area a First World War prisoner of war camp, and there may also be a township further south. So they want an archaeological watching brief for the site. Not watching brief, they want an archaeological valuation desktop study, and that's suggested as a planning condition. Because they'll be doing that, it sort of ties in with the contaminated land people who've also said that if there was some sort of First World War prisoner of war camp on this site, that they would want to know that there was no contamination. We understand from the applicants that the site has been ploughed numerous times by the farmer, and there's been no evidence of anything, but that doesn't, that's anecdotal evidence, I suppose, and they want to be assured on that point. So the archaeology team and the contaminated land team are happy with a combined condition that once the archaeological investigation is done, that can inform the need for any further contaminated land investigations. So in terms of amenity, the site is considered not to have any the development is not considered to have any adverse impacts on surrounding properties at Linstock Park, it's far enough away to safeguard the privacy and amenity of those properties. The sites are large enough so whereby houses can be sited within the development to be appropriately levels of amenity. Could be a variety of semi-detached and detached houses in the site. So in conclusion, we feel that there is a case to depart from development plan policy, given that the development complies with all other relevant development plan policies. The enlarged site will help deliver a lower density development reflective of the forest village of Nethy Bridge, with the edge of village location leading visually into the rural landscape beyond. The proposed western expansion of the designation towards the River Nethy is largely in line with the extent of the existing housing at Linstock Park, while the expansion to the south stops short at a clear visual landmark, the Knoll. And in these circumstances, we consider that the locational need has been sufficiently established in relation to extending in a satisfactory manner an allocated housing site on the edge of a settlement, using and supporting existing servicing and facilities and providing much needed new housing. So on that basis, we recommend approval of the application, subject to all the conditions outlined in the report, which have been discussed with the applicant, and subject to a legal agreement. These conditions are requiring further a bit more detail on matters. They're not requiring, largely not requiring new information. So we feel that they're appropriate. We've also got a condition setting out what we would expect from full applications for the individual houses. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Catherine. Members will now move to questions, and the first question from Bill Lobbin.
Catherine, it says in item 168 in your report that High Life Highland have suggested that there's an aspiration to extend the leisure facility offering in the Badenachan Centre in Kingussie. Why would we consider using any, I suppose, benefit that we get from the development and spend it in a town a considerable distance away, rather than either locally or at very worst in Granton and Spey, where High Life Highland also have an operation.
We asked Highland High Life for some input into the wording in the local development plan, which said that we should get a developer contributions toward obligations towards strategic community facilities. And we asked them, was there any proposal for expansion of strategic community facilities? And they said there was this aspiration. But equally, they did say that they were they would be supportive of contributions being directed towards more local proposals. And so when we talked to them about the community action plan for Nethy Bridge, so Highland High Life were supportive of the idea that it be used more locally, any monies be used more locally in the village itself, where it will be a more direct impact from the development.
Okay, thank you. So to be clear, that any developer contributions will be directed towards Nethy Bridge then, rather than anywhere else?
So that's the intention. That's what's been discussed with the applicant and Highland High Life and ourselves. But we believe that that complies with the local development plan policy.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Any other questions, members? Michael.
Yeah, thank you. Catherine, you mentioned there about the developer doing a cut and fill from the knoll. I was going to say the grassy knoll, but and I'm just wondering about if you could explain more about how they're going to capture any existing field drains within that area when they start cutting down into it.
Sorry, I'll just try and get the section 1 up. You can see at the top section on the right-hand side, you can see the cat. I think it's, the applicant will no doubt correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's maybe a couple of metres at its deepest part. It's 10 metres, that cat is 10 metres back from the knoll area, so there won't be any impact on the sort of, what do you call it, the ecosystem of the knoll. As for the field drains, I'm afraid I'm not really aware of what the situation is with the field drains. I don't know if the applicant would be able to expand on that later if you've got any questions for him. But we weren't, there's no sort of obvious evidence on that part of the site of the field drains. There's a drainage sort of ditch that's dry down in the nearer Linstock Park, and that's which we saw in the site visit, but that's not been affected by any of the development. They're not digging near there at all.
Okay, thank you. Question from John Kirk.
I don't think there is any field drains in there. There's only the open ditch. I've never ever seen anybody working in drains in there. It's pretty gravelly, so it's just open ditch.
Okay, thank you, John. Duncan Miller.
Catherine, you said just at the start that before any development was to happen, that the trees and the planting would have to be established first. Is that like, just for clarity, is that like established, just like planted, or do they need to get to a certain growth stage? Or
I maybe didn't phrase that quite correctly. The condition is suggesting that once they start the development, they should, in the first planting season after starting the development, that they should plant the area beside the knoll, which is the sort of hedging, and the riparian planting at the bottom of the plots nearest to the River Nethy, so that that planting is kind of established before the individual houses start coming in. So that when those individual houses come in, people start building on that. The hope would be that planting would be a bit established and would discourage people from, walking over to the knoll or throwing compost over the fence or whatever. But that, the wider landscaping, no, we're not suggesting that all the landscaping be done at that stage, and that we would, I think our suggestion, we've got a condition that sets out when the landscaping should be done, but we wouldn't be expecting them to do all the landscaping, no.
Okay, thank you. Eleanor McIntosh.
Hi, Catherine, I might be missing it in the conditions, or I'm not sure, but there's quite a lot of ground that's not going to be developed, old grazing ground, that seem to have some environmental kudos within it. And there was a suggestion at the site visit that that should be grazed from time to time rather than mowed. I wondered, have we taken that forward at all? Or could we take that forward as a condition?
The areas, there's a large area of open space at that sort of floodplain bit that will be pretty much left and developed, although we have a condition that we want to get details of the fencing of it and so on, and an information board there. The areas that run through the site, those wide corridors, there's different levels of landscaping of that. It's not all going to be mown. Parts of it will be cut by the applicant's factor, but other parts will be longer grass to encourage biodiversity on that site.
But I thought the whole point of that discussion at the site visit was that it was the grazing that encouraged the wealth of environmental benefit rather than mowing or artificially landscaping.
I've got our ecology advisor here, Scott Shanks. If Scott could maybe add a little bit to that. We've discussed this in a bit of detail, actually. Sorry, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one of the management sort of the, particularly of the ecological kind of corridors going through the site, is to do a kind of cut and collect. So there'd be, instead of I guess it's a method to try and replicate a set of grazing on the site where you allow the wildflowers to grow during the day, during the year, and then they're cut in September, autumn time. And instead of leaving the grass cuttings kind of sort of there to go rot down and the nutrients to go back into the site, they would actually collect those and actually take them off, and that keeps the nutrients kind of sort of low. So the benefits of doing that is that instead of the nutrients going back in and the grass is being encouraged, you actually then encourage wildflowers to sort of come through, and it kind of replicates the kind of a sort of grazing regime. Does that make sense?
It does, but why don't you simply just allow certain times where you put in half a dozen sheep or something? You know, but I don't see why it's a complicated replication system of what a few animals will do naturally.
So that cut and collect system is mainly for the main part of the site and kind of through the actual developed part of the site. So in there, there would be, as a standard, a kind of like annual kind of cut with a mower, and then they would collect that kind of vegetation and take it off to keep those nutrients kind of low. So I think it just wouldn't be practical to have kind of cattle or sheep kind of grazing in there. I mean, definitely one of the things that the grazing is doing is keeping that nutrients low and preventing it sort of building up and stopping stuff going rank. But actually, this kind of management system where you do this cut and collect is actually pretty good, and you see that being used in many places in order to encourage a kind of meadow management. So it is a standard condition. I think just the practicality of a development site, you wouldn't be able to have kind of sheep kind of in there. The open space at the south of the site, which is kind of like currently neutral grassland, kind of sort of much ranker kind of neutral grassland. So there's obviously some grazing in there, but you can see from Catherine's pictures, not at the moment, from Catherine's pictures, you could see that it wasn't grazed particularly so much, and a lot of the species that were in there were obviously surviving without a sort of a constant sort of grazing regime that was kind of in there.
Yeah, and I think it would maybe add to that it would be, that area is, that area in the west part and the left-hand side, that large area of open space is there, I suppose, for purposes of people, they could walk their dogs in there. It's part of the site, the open space links into it, so I think it might be quite difficult for the applicant to have sheep in there as part of a development site, I would tend to say.
You content, Elmer? Thank you for your contribution, Scott. Is there any other questions for Catherine? Okay, thank you, members. Thank you, Catherine. We'll now move to, I'll invite Andrew Lilly and Ron Lang for the applicants to come forward to make their presentation. You have 10 minutes in total, gentlemen, and I'll give you a 1 minute warning at 9 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, all. I'm Ron Lang of AW Lang Limited, a local family building firm, local to Grattan-on-Spey. As an employer, I know only too well issues relating to affordable housing. In fact, for that matter, all types of housing. And I've recognised to survive and grow our business, we require a good cross-section of work and clients. I'll just move on. This slide here shows the existing electricity services and the existing public water supply. Both these will need diversion. The next slide shows, Catherine showed it earlier, the proposals made by the Roads Department. The next slide you've all seen again, it shows the site as proposed. Now, as mentioned earlier, as board members are aware, planning permission was recently approved for 21 houses at the former Nethy Station site. Today's talk is about 35 houses at this site. The sites are interlinked in the respect that approval of this development provides an opportunity to offer the 21 house Nethy Station development as 100% affordable properties. In terms of proximity to shops, bus routes and other local facilities, the Nethy Station site ticks all the boxes. The Nethy Station development is definitely a front runner as far as that is concerned. It would seem prudent, as mentioned earlier, to concentrate the affordable housing allocation of this site at the Nethy Station development. This principle was discussed with Highland Council, and the Highland Council housing officer is 100% behind it. And she prompted us to speak to Alban Housing Society, and they're keen to work with us in developing the Nethy Station site as 100% affordable. So between our two sites, the statutory affordable housing allocation is 14 houses. The additional 7 house betterment proposed must represent a substantial community gain. Against a background of a local housing crisis, it seems irresponsible or maybe even short-sighted to landlock and abandon the perfectly good developable land out with that designated. Once the SEPA floodplain, 218-metre wide wildlife corridors, ground allocated for a suds pool, drainage pumping station, ecological strips to protect fungi, riparian corridors, play area, road infrastructure are removed, the residual areas out with that designated are disjointed and lost forever. Any additional housing will relieve pressure on existing housing stock, with housing plots being in limited supply. At the moment, smaller housing properties are being purchased to demolish and erect a new house at a high cost, well out with the budgets of local people. The 35 units will provide more affordable housing in the village and address some of the pressure for new open market housing locally. Scaling economies, with infrastructure costs being spread over more properties. The site has got normal infrastructure costs associated with the wastewater pumping station, diversion of existing electricity and water supplies, alterations to existing road, wildlife corridors, planting associated with riparian corridors and other landscaping proposals. They all add to development costs. Again, keep in mind the historic use of the field. It was agriculture, with livestock present up until just a few weeks ago. Over the years, fertilisers have been applied. The introduction of wildlife corridors between the existing woodland and the riparian woodland at the River Nethy is surely a major improvement for the overall biodiversity. The 10-metre separation being provided alongside the knoll at the southerly end, along with demands for prickly bushes, provides protection requested for the fungi. Overall, we've adjusted the proposals to meet all the requirements of the CNP ecology team to protect biodiversity and protect the species of interest identified. I have every respect for CNP planners. However, when they ticked of policies relevant to the assessment of this application. They overlook one which to me is important, Policy 25, Community Wealth Building, which relates to local economic development with a primary consideration being to support local employment and supply chains. It also mentions increased spending within communities, ensuring the use of local supply chains and services, also local job creation. Our local youngsters require employment. We employ directly and indirectly 60 to 70 people who are all local. Currently, we have 5 local apprentices. Further, new householders will spend locally, helping safeguard local shops. We've been involved in manufacturing low-energy timber frame houses for over 45 years. We were installing MVHR units 30 years ago, fitted ground source, air source, water source, air pumps regularly for the last 20 years. As a company, we're committed to a responsibility towards climate change and building sustainable, adaptable homes for people in the local community. Our subcontractors are now fully accredited renewable energy installers. In summary, we are offering the opportunity to provide an additional 7 affordable houses, a low-carbon housing development, local employment opportunities, training for young people in renewable technology, all at a time when we have a national housing crisis. We have worked with and met all the requirements of the application committees and hope you support this application fully. I'll now hand you over to Andrew Lilly, our architect.
Yes, video, please. Good afternoon, members of the Planning Committee. There is a video to come, but I'll just get started. My name is Andrew Lilly, and I'm here on behalf of Colin Armstrong, Architects and Developer AW Lang, to present our proposed housing development, Nethy Bridge. We're proud to share a scheme that we believe represents best practice in placemaking, one that's sensitive to its setting within the national park and shaped by extensive collaboration. From the outset, this project has been guided by a deep respect for the landscape, ecology and community. We've worked closely with the Planning Authority, landscape and ecology teams, transport planners and local residents to ensure the development is not only appropriate but exemplary. At the heart of the layout is a simple and efficient loop road designed to provide clear access while minimising hard infrastructure. At its topographical low point, we've integrated a sustainable urban drainage system basin, which also serves as a turning area for Scottish water maintenance vehicles, a practical solution that blends infrastructure with landscape. Development is divided into 3 distinct clusters of houses. This approach reflects the traditional settlement pattern of the area, helps to break down the massing, making it more appropriate for the edge of village setting. Between these clusters, we've created new ecologically rich wildlife corridors, transforming what is currently a ploughed and grazed field into a network of biodiverse green spaces. These corridors are not just preserved, they're actively enhanced in line with NPF4's policies of net biodiversity gain. They provide safe passage for wildlife and protected species, linking the renaturalised Scots pine woodland across Lethic Road with the riparian woodland along the River Nethy. Within these corridors, we've included pathways for residents, rain gardens to create wetland habitats and natural play areas, all contributing to a rich, diverse and meaningful amenity space. We've also taken care to conserve existing juniper bushes, allowing them space to spread and rewild naturally. A mix of fencing types has been proposed to soften the visual impact and reflect the character of the village. Importantly, we've maintained a generous setback from existing housing, creating a further wildlife corridor and ensuring privacy and breathing space. There's also a significant setback from the River Nethy, in line with updated floodplain regulations, which not only protects the development, but also allows for the expansion of riparian woodland into what is currently grazed farmland. To the rear of the site, a natural ha-ha wall and landscape buffer separate the development from the wild knolls and lightly grazed grasslands beyond, preserving the transition from village into open countryside. By developing the full area of site landlocked by the floodplain and protected knoll landscape, we've been able to create a more coherent, cohesive and efficient layout. This allows for better access to shared amenities, a wider range of house types and plot sizes that suit a variety of budgets, including many modest plots aimed at local residents. This broader mix also helps to reduce infrastructure costs per plot, which in turn supports greater affordability, a key concern for the community. Finally, the wildlife corridors not only support biodiversity, but also protect key views towards the Cairngorm Mountains, ensuring that the development sits lightly in this treasured landscape. In summary, we believe this proposal represents a thoughtful, collaborative and high-quality response to a very special site. It balances the needs of people and nature, and we hope that it will serve as a model for sustainable rural development within the National Park. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. Members, do we have any questions for the applicants? And the first question is from Eleanor McIntosh.
Hi, guys. You know, and you touched on your presentation, Ron, that the pressure for affordable housing, and I'm not speaking social housing, I'm talking about housing for workers within the National Park. And land's at a premium, especially around Nethy, I would say. I just wondered if you would consider doing what other developers have done in Beanaghinstris Bay and set a time-limited period where you advertise to local people a chance to buy houses, rather than just put them all out on the open market in one go. I just feel that we could end up with an unlived village sitting on the side of Nethy Bridge, because I mean it's a nice site, and I just wonder if you would give consideration to doing that.
Well, you know, just 2 or 3 comments. First one is that within the development, as we've presented it here, there is a substantial mix of houses. There are quite a lot of semi-detached houses, which will be at a lower price. The second thing is, it's difficult for me to answer this now, in the respect that, and this is where it's good sometimes to speak to members, as a local builder, for a while there, on each 3-bedroom house that we were building, we were losing about £20,000 to £30,000 on an affordable house. That is going by the benchmark figures that the housing associations are asking us. So if we're continually against that background, unless we can get abnormal costs, allowances fitted into it, as a business, we won't be here long. You know, so we're working towards that at the Nethy Bridge, at the Nethy station. Now, most builders, I understand, are providing 25% affordable. We're providing nearly 40% affordable between these two sites, which is a big head start in trying to help the local community, and also appreciate that over the last 30 years, we've been involved in probably building 80 to 90 affordable houses with mainly Alban Housing Association and with small communities trusts. And historically, we used to get more for our benchmark figures. That figure has got tighter and tighter. And it's something I brought up with the Scottish Government ministers, the Cabinet ministers, and they acknowledged that builders, to a certain extent, were losing money, and it's minuted in a lot of things from councils further south. So it's a problem for us. It's a balance, a very real problem.
But Ron, I've maybe not made my point clear enough. I'm not suggesting you up the affordable allocation.
Yeah.
I'm just asking, is it possible to market your open-priced housing? I'm not looking for a reduction in price. Just market your open market housing allocation locally for a set period of time.
Yeah, that's something we consider. I mean, the nearest parallel to it is we've built about, I think, about 20 houses in Carbridge, just as you enter Carbridge from the Grantown side, and they were all private. And because we're small, we can't do this over 1 year or 2 years. When we've been speaking to Alban, we've been negotiating 3 years to do the 21 houses. Nethy Bridge, I don't think, needs 56 houses overnight or anything like it. So it's an organic thing for us. Now, in Carbridge, what has happened, it's mainly local people that have come to us just in 1s and 2s, and there are a lot of them. In fact, some of those who even work in the National Park living in one of the Carbridge developments. So it's an organic thing like that there. So we just have to see, but I think the first step for us is to see what we can get over the line.
Okay, thanks. Just for clarity, that's a suggestion. That's not something we're looking at as a condition. So that's just a suggestion from a member. Bill Lobbin.
Mr Lang, during your presentation you mentioned Highland Council. Would I be right in assuming that there are no concrete proposals from Highland Council to purchase any of these dwellings?
Sorry, Highland Council Housing Officer has said that she's recognised the advantages of focusing everyone down at the Nethy Station site.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, members? Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much. I'd like to ask Tessa Jones and Pete Crane to come forward now to make their contribution, please. You also have 10 minutes, and we'll give you a 1-minute warning at 9 minutes.
Good afternoon. National Park for People and Place. Oh. 35 houses, biggest development in Nethy Bridge in 50 years. And I'm being a bit technical here. I have a couple of objections, but they're more ways that I think if you agree with them, it'll make this development better. Into policy, national planning framework says that a scale of this scale needs to deliver active travel. We've already heard that a multi-use path can't be built, yet we've got lots of young people, children, walking and cycling to school. And this was talked about. 20 years ago, 10 houses were built and 4 bits of traffic calming were put in. The bollards have gone and it's going to be removed. So we're going to have a busier road with no traffic calming, and nothing can be done to make it safer for cycling. But there's already examples of what can be done. And this is down at Cromdale, a new housing development of fewer houses where traffic calming has been introduced. So I think this is going to work for the people of Nethy Bridge. We need to have some traffic calming from the development to the Causa. It's not a difficult change to make. My next point is that this kind of work of this scale needs to be better for nature. It's a national planning framework but it's also within your national park plan, or our national park plan. And the local development plan that you're currently consulting on says that these nature corridors need to be bigger, better and joined up if we're going to get 30% of our land in better condition. And here, the top line is comment from the current local development plan about linking to the woodlands. And you can see on the left-hand side, there's the pine woodland that links, and in blue, the ancient woodland. And woodland that's been there for at least 150 years, and in blue, much longer. Yet the only strip that links that isn't a play park, isn't an area where dogs can be walked, that is a general nature corridor, is 5 metres wide. It's 5 metres wide to link all of that nature from one woodland to the other. And I just think it can be wider. I think it can be better. And I got a little bit of a positive feedback from the developers. In response, it might be possible to introduce some more planting. And all I'd like you to do is say, please make it possible to make that 5 metre strip wider for nature. That's all I had to say.
Shall I just go? Okay. Right, well, thank you very much. As presently proposed, this development looks like high-cost houses, of which Nethy already has many, and it's questionable what the advantages are of 35 more, and remembering all the issues of houses bought for second homes or as investments. The present proposal does not combine housing with nature's needs, nor the overarching objective of NPF 4 to tackle the nature and climate crisis, nor the government priority of halting biodiversity loss. There is scope for better use of this exceptional field than today's proposal. There could be an option to retain the 21 houses at the station, preferably all as affordable if possible, and have 20 within the LDP allocation at Lettach, with modest houses with a much higher degree of affordability to mid-market buyers, that's teachers, nurses, etc., and more in line with the Community Council's recommendation. This application raises very real issues of connectivity for biodiversity, including along the River Nethy, as well as between the major woodland habitats. We want to emphasise the very high value of woodland, edge and forest glade habitats, where open, sunny, flower-rich habitats and damp grassland and bogs are combined with woodland. This is looking across the site from Lettach Road, which is also part of Nethy Bridge's promoted path network for walking and cycling. And this exceptional view in a setting with granny pines would obviously be impacted, and the walking routes help to underpin the tourist economy. Oh, I think we're one ahead. Sorry. Okay. This shows the red line boundary, and I've added the rough outline in black of the local development plan allocation so that you can see the space in the field left for biodiversity, connectivity and landscape. Right, this is part of the view that is retained from the road if the LDP allocation were built. The LDP allocation allows space for grazing. This can be wild grazes, both roe deer and hare have been recorded breeding on the site. It provides for raptors to hunt over the field, where remarkably white-tailed eagle have been seen catching a hare, and waders, which are struggling. We've had oyster catchers breeding there, curlew and lapwing feeding, and woodcock roading. Or grazing by sheep could be used, with space to add a gateway from the road. And the LDP allocation provides space to allow riparian woodland to expand onto the floodplain with natural order regeneration. Considering impacts on Capercaillie, the development is roughly at the end of the road in the picture, close enough to be attractive to dog walkers, runners, walkers, etc. This gateway leads into ground that borders the woodland opposite the development, and here we do have signs of Kappa use. There is cotton grass in this area that provides important nutrients for hens prior to egg laying, and good connectivity of, at present, a little disturbed area that connects to both Culstank wood and Culstank moss that are also little disturbed and known to be used by Kappa. It also supports biodiversity list species such as large heath and arrow-headed ant, and also the pinewood special bumblebee robberfly. This shows the development area with the black line of the LDP allocation and the red oval at the bottom of the site that is proposed for the dog walking area. That this was to be turned into a dog area was not mentioned at the site visit, at which the meeting was told it would be left undisturbed. We are concerned this proposal, that has significant impacts on landscape and biodiversity, has not been properly assessed because it was not fully known about. We know this to be a key biodiversity hotspot within the site. The landscape officer noted the value of unimproved or semi-improved grassland around the site edges and recommended that these grasslands should be retained, which we support. They are very important areas. The officer provided their advice in March, whereas the dog walking was not proposed until June, so obviously they made no comment on it. A dog walking area would be disturbed, and we disagree that there'd be any question of it not being disturbed, and that it would also be trimmed or mown. And it would also undermine the intention of the connecting corridors because you're reducing the ground that you're trying to connect through using it for dog walking with regular mowings, the likely addition of activities for dogs, seats for owners, etc., etc. However, this is the dog walking site at Aviemore. However, we do support the principle of having a dog area to take pressure off woodlands, and if the LDP allocation were developed, there could be accommodated a small area along the southwest edge of that, a small fenced area for dog walking, and also bearing in mind that 20 houses would on average have 7 dogs rather than 13 if it were 35 houses. We also note that the mitigation for Kappa impacts is considered essential according to the CMPA assessments that were approved by Nature Scott. The site supports very important species that the CMPA and other partners are putting money into considering. All the photos that are coming up of the biodiversity, except the otter at the end, are taken on the site or beside it on the hillock. The blood red longhorn beetle shown here is critically endangered in UK with its stronghold in the national park. On the site from the left in the picture, it's feeding and being a pollinator at the top of the site nearish the road, and I'm pointing to it. At the right, it's mating at the site towards the knoll, and at the bottom of the site near the river, it is egg laying.
Yes, you have 1 minute left.
Oh, thank you. Into the granny pine we saw on the site visit. Every stage of its life cycle is happening on this site. Crimson waxcap occurs in several different parts of the site, as well as blushing waxcap, both CMPA species. Lemon slug is an ancient woodland indicator. Malachite beetle, only a few reckoned in Scotland. Pinewood mason bee, another vulnerable priority species the CMPA is targeted for conservation, and its associated rare ruby-tailed wasp. And the small scabious, oh sorry, one too fast. And the small scabious mining bee, another CMPA conservation priority. And the rare nationally scarce raft spider that is breeding on the site. And I'll skip over those ones, I'll skip over that one. This is a dead otter that was found beside the Spey a few months ago, and the autopsy found it had the highly pathogenic bird flu, evidently jumped from bird to mammal, perhaps by the otter eating, say, an infected grey-lag goose.
Tess, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to stop there.
Right,
Thank you very
okay.
much. Thank you. Members, do we have any questions for Tessa or Pete? John Kirk.
The wood across the road, Tessa, is it not coming down behind the council houses?
I think it's due for thinning.
I think it's coming down flat. It is? It's going to be flattened.
Okay, well, if it's coming down flat, yeah, it obviously has bigger impacts.
Okay, thank you. Steve McCorrick.
Yeah, the wildlife corridor width, I thought that was rather narrow as well. So what's your recommendation for the optimal width of that?
I'll be honest here, I'm not a specialist, but I think the internal ones, which are going to be used by people and dog walking, I think are 30 metres, and that's 5. So I think something wider. And when I fed back to the planning application, the developer did suggest there was room for that. But I think it needs to be wider than 5 metres if it's going to work as a native corridor.
Anne Ross.
You referred to the number of dogs that people could potentially have. How did you calculate that, please?
It was taken from the planning documents that are on it. There's a sort of average for the UK, I think. So that was taken from your documents.
Okay, members, are there any other questions? Catherine, is there anything you would like to raise with the speakers?
Yeah, if I could just go back and clarify a couple of points. Ron Lang raised the community wealth building policy, which we do recognise. I appreciate it wasn't ticked, but policy 16 of the National Planning Framework said that for development proposals for more than 50 houses, that they should be accompanied by a statement of community benefit, which is proportionate. We didn't ask for a community benefit statement or community wealth building statement with this application because it was of a smaller scale, it wouldn't require it. But there's, and if we, normally if you were asking for a community wealth building supporting document, there would be quite a bit of detail in it. But having said that, we don't see any conflicts with the community wealth building policy of National Planning Framework as he's outlined. So it's just to say that we had considered it and don't see any conflicts. The application as was outlined will support local jobs, etc. Also want to just talk about the traffic calming that Pete Pete Crane referred to and showed some illustrations of potential traffic calming. The transport team of Highland Council have not, they asked for those curb bits to be removed, but they have asked for some traffic calming or road widening, some works to be done at the Linstock Crescent end of Latick Road for the reason of making the improvements for traffic connectivity and make it safer. So that has been considered by the transport team. In terms of the nature corridors, the ones proposed by the applicants are 18 metres wide, and they're felt to be sufficient for the site, and increasing the width of the corridor beside Linstock Park would then reduce those corridors. In terms of the dog, what was referred to as dog walking, that area is an area of open space that's available for anyone within the development to walk. When we say it's undisturbed, there's no proposals to manage it, to change the landscaping, to plant on it, etc. But when we say it was left undisturbed, I don't think the intention was ever that it would not be used by anybody, but it's certainly not, there's no proposal for bits of equipment as was shown on the drawing for a formal change of use to a dog walking area or dog exercise area. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Tessa Peake, could I ask you to retake your seats behind us? Thank you very much for your contributions. Members, we'll now move to debate. Bill Lobbin.
This is the most obvious development site in Nethy Bridge and the surrounding area. It's an open farmer's field. It's within reasonable connectivity to the rest of Nethy Bridge. And in association with the other recently approved site, gives a really extensively or expansively enhanced provision of affordable housing. If you look at the houses in general, the majority of them, or certainly a good part of them, will not become short-term lets because they're in a short-term let control area. So I don't want to labour the point, but in my honest opinion, this is a development that we should approve wholeheartedly because it's good for Nethy Bridge, it's good for the local community, and this is exactly what we want to see. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. John Kirk.
I fully agree with Bill, but I also like how Ron builds his houses over a 10-year period or whatever it is, and it lets the wildlife and the site develop itself. And I think it's great that I have wildlife corridors through it. I don't think I know of any other sites that have it, and you could argue 5 metres, 6 metres, but it'd be also nice to see some fruit trees in there, Ron. I think it'd be a fantastic area, you know, to put some fruit trees in it and make it part of the community and be able to use. And I think it's a fantastic development. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Eleanor McIntosh.
Yeah, I don't like to see agricultural land coming out of agriculture, but I could see the reason for it. I don't see anywhere really else where Nethy Bridge is going to go to grow. I think it is a good development. I like everything about it. My question to Ron about marketing, I think it was answered in a roundabout way, i.e. it'll be done organically, so it won't be like one big marketing block. So I'm kind of content with that. So yeah, I support this as well.
Okay, thank you. Sandy Bremner.
Yeah, just on the basis of what we've read, heard and seen, I'd like to commend the applicant's responsiveness to our officers and to third-party representations, understanding there are obviously some significant areas of disagreement. I mean, this is a good application for much-needed housing. I'll certainly be supporting it, subject to conditions, obviously the key legal agreements on affordable housing.
Okay, thank you. Lauren McCallum.
Yeah, I think this is a really good application and I will be supporting it. But just before, just on the wildlife corridors, just so I'm really clear, there's no room to make that into 6 or 7 metres. Did you say if you eat into that, then the other ones at 18 would be smaller? Just so I've got that correct.
Yeah. I'll just go, bring up the slide of let's get the better one. You can see the two main corridors running through the site, and there it's 18 metres wide. And then up beside Linstock Park, there's a way leave, a bit of ground at the back of the houses there that's 5 metres wide. That's just rough grass, fenced off. And then there's another 5 metre landscape strip proposed by the applicant. So the overall width of that strip would be 10 metres from the back of Linstock Park, but only 5 metres would be the applicant's. If you were to make that wider, then those plots would get smaller, and so the whole thing would be constricted in. The applicants have already, at the bottom end of the site where you've got that little play area, they've already reduced the size of that play area a little bit to bring the development further away from the knoll area for ecology reasons. So they've already pulled in a bit, and I don't think, realistically, maybe, the development's been set out in that certain way with these corridors.
Okay, thank you. Duncan Miller.
Yeah, just to say that I also really like the proposal, and I think it's great to see down at Nethy Station, if this was to be approved as well, more affordable housing for the area, and it's exactly what this area needs. So I'll also be supporting it.
Thank you, Duncan. Steve McCorrick.
Yeah, I like this one too. I support it. I think I understand the corridor. So the 218, the two wider ones, and then you've got the narrower one down the bottom, and the narrow one is the 5 metre one. Is that right? Okay, got that. That's okay then. One thing I've noticed in some of the comments, that they describe some of the indicative buildings as being suburban in character and things like that. So when we start to see the plans for the buildings, if they could be more in keeping with the rural nature of the area, that would be really nice. But other than that, I think it's a really good plan.
Thank you, Steve. Derek Ross.
I mean, we've seen the site, we've heard the debate today and heard from everyone. Thanks very much, Catherine, as well, for your contribution. I move that we accept.
Okay, thank you, Derek. Is anyone otherwise minded? Okay, on the basis of that, I am very happy to agree with my colleagues. I also think it's a good application, and it's good news for Nethy Bridge, Strathspey and the National Park, and 21 affordable houses is good news for local people and people coming to work in the park. So with that, the application is approved subject to conditions. Members, we will have a 10-minute comfort break at this point before we go on to the next item. Thank you, members. We'll resume now. Before we move on to item 5, just like to record that Peter Crosgrove has now rejoined us and Sandy Bremner is just about to leave us. And could we give Derek Ross a round of applause when he eventually rejoins us as well, please? Okay, members. Item 5 is an application for detailed planning permission, the Upper Dee River and floodplain restoration at a site at the River Dee from number 14469203 up to the confluence with the Coich water at 12269068 Aberdeenshire. The recommendation is to approve subject to conditions, and I'd like to welcome Colin Bryan, Senior Planning Officer, to present this. Thank you, Colin.
Thank you very much. This proposal is for Upper Dee River floodplain restoration. You can see the site here is located upstream of the village Braemar. It extends westwards to the confluence of the Coich River. You have to forgive me for Coich. I might get that wrong again later in the presentation. But yes, the confluence between the Coich River and the River Dee. The application site itself consists of the River Dee channel, its banks, and then land extending northwards towards the Allenmore track. And if you look at the topography of the site here, the Allenmore track kind of runs along the point where the flatland land drastically starts to rise upwards, so to the north of the river channel. The land beyond the riverbanks is subject to this application is mostly low-lying wet land, not wetland, but wet land or wet ground, with a smaller proportion of the site located on higher ground, which is currently under agricultural use, and that's kind of to the west of the site there near the Coich River. The application site is located within a number of designations. It's within the Eastern Cairngorm Site of Special Scientific Interest. It's within the Mar Lodge Estate National Nature Reserve, within the River Dee Special Area of Conservation, and within the Cairngorm Special Protection Area. So the aims of the proposal broadly are to reverse the impacts of historical modifications on the river channel along this portion. And it includes a number of different elements, and I'll just quickly run you through them. So there's going to be riverbank armour removal to allow the river to adjust its course more naturally. The floodplain embankment removal to allow the river and the floodplain to become better connected and to facilitate more water storage. There's the installation of large deadwood structures to drive future channel dynamism within the river channel, and also habitat creation both within and out with the river channel. There's the creation of a series of scrapes or low-lying ground of variable depths to create a wider wetland habitat, and that's those elements you can see in blue kind of inland from the river channel. And then there is an element of riparian woodland planting also. Some aerial shots of the site just to give you a bit of a feeling for what we're talking about here, because some of it can be hard to picture in the mind's eye. You can see kind of running up parallel to the river and then sweeping off to the right along parallel to it is that embankment that we spoke of. This is the rock armour along the river channel bank that is going to be removed along sections of it. This is the east end of the site. And focusing in more here, you can see in the orange there, the embankment areas that are going to be removed. In the kind of red lines along the river bank is the rock armour embankment, and then also those kind of scrapes that are going to be created. And the green elements within the scrapes, or islands for want of a better word, are higher sitting portions of land within the lowland created by the scrapes. And you can also see the small T-shapes there are the dead wood structures that are going to be placed within the river channel and out with the river channel. Looking at the west of the site here, this is good at showing you that it is wet currently. So despite the fact that the historic embankment is there and the rock armour embankment is still there, it's still a wet environment, and there is still an element of flooding on the site. Again, you can see here there's quite a section of embankment to be removed. A little bit less kind of rock armour bank here, but still elements of it, and then a good number of scrape areas that are being created along with the large deadwood structures that are being placed within the channel and out with the channel. in terms of material considerations, the principle of the development, delivering the reinstatement of a natural river form and process, thus increasing biodiversity. These are all supported in principle by both MPF4 and the local development plan, and there's no loss of prime agricultural land associated with this. The agricultural element of the site tends to be restricted to the westernmost extent of the site, just to the left of what we're looking at here, unfortunately. But it's, yeah, so in and around where the construction track's running down there is the bit of the site that sits a bit higher and is a bit drier, and there's an element of grazing there. In terms of design and landscape impacts, the development is consistent with the 6 qualities of successful space identified by MPF4, and in particular, it will contribute to the quality sustainability by integrating nature and biodiversity positive solutions within the design. The proposal also supports the attractive natural spaces and is therefore also consistent with the pleasant quality as identified by MPF 414. In terms of environment and biodiversity and habitats regulations assessment, the River Dee SAC Special Area of Conservation it has qualifying features of freshwater pearl mussels, Atlantic salmon and also otter. The proposed river restoration development will benefit in-channel habitat diversity and channel floodplain connectivity. The in-channel habitat diversity will largely be driven by the deadwood structures that are going to be placed within the channel, which will disrupt the water flow, creating a more variable depths, more areas of kind of shallow land gravel, deep pools, that type of thing, and the large wood structures in themselves provide habitat for invertebrates. The channel floodplain connectivity is associated with the removal of the embankment and the removal of the rock armour bank, and both of these elements may contribute to increased distribution and availability of habitats for freshwater pearl mussels, for Atlantic salmon and otter, so for all 3 elements of qualifying features for the SAC. But the biodiversity benefits of the proposal will apply beyond these qualifying features of the SAC, providing increased quantity and quality of habitat for a range of flora and fauna. For example, peregrine and osprey are also likely to benefit from this through increased foraging areas. Habitats regulation assessment, appropriate assessment, has been undertaken, the conclusions of which were reviewed and agreed by NatureScot. In terms of the nature and the scale of the impacts and effectiveness of mitigations proposed within the application. To summarise this, the impacts of the proposal post-construction are largely seen to be positive across the board in terms of flora and fauna and environmental and biodiversity impacts. Some detrimental impacts on the designated site and qualifying features are expected during the construction works. However, the proposal included outlined mitigation measures, and we have recommended a condition that requires the submission and agreement of a construction environmental management plan, which will need to include full details of proposed mitigation measures, including any additional surveys associated with timing of construction. So the potential detrimental impacts on environment and ecology are all associated with that construction process, but we're satisfied by the information that's submitted that the answers are there, and we're going to require full details to be agreed through the construction environmental management plan and the associated condition. Flooding and surface water, SEPA raised no objection to the proposal. The proposal included detailed flood modelling. SEPA agreed with the findings of that, noting that the scheme will have minimal impact on estimated flood levels and it may provide some flood storage, potentially reducing flood volumes downstream. But I think across the board it was seen to be pretty minimal, the effects it was having on any flooding. So to conclude, the proposal fully aligns with the development plan, that's MPF4 and the local development plan, and subject to the recommended conditions and the mitigations that will be agreed through the construction environmental management plan, the recommendation is for approval. Thank you.
Colin, thank you very much for your presentation. Members, do you have any questions or anything you would like Colin to clarify? Pete Cosgrove.
Thank you very much for that. Please, could you just provide some comfort regarding the requirements of protected species surveys with a different job and a different client? I've actually worked on that site before and I know there are protected species there. So I'm assuming that part of the Kent will require pre-construction surveys for all protected species. Is that the case?
The Kent will require the surveys of protected species to be valid at the time of construction. So, for example, we know that the most recent freshwater pearl mussel survey was undertaken in May this year. We know that the Nature Scots standing guidance is that any survey is good for the 3 survey windows, essentially. So, for example, if they were to, and with this project, one of the mitigations is that it can only be constructed within quite a tight window through the calendar. So, essentially, I think it's August pushing into early September. So, if it's constructed this August or next August, we're okay, we don't need a freshwater pearl mussel survey. But generally speaking, the Construction Environmental Management Plan will need to lay all of those details out. It will need to inform us of what the construction window is going to be, what surveys they have undertaken that are valid within that construction window and why, and also propose to fill any gaps within that.
To just follow up, the reason I mention it is I'm literally just been spending the last 2 or 3 weeks working on a site where freshwater pearl mussels were the issue, and the previous surveys, which were not very old, were 3 years old, so they were just within the window on a site, and there were 6 pearl mussels, and a licence was applied so that they could be moved for this development on a different river, I would have to say. And then upon going onto the site, we found over 300 pearl mussels in the area because they've been washed in much more recently than the last survey. So it was just a case of, I think, making sure that we're up to speed on this and that we're not caught out and that the contractors don't inadvertently commit an offence would be recommended from my side of things.
Thank you, Pete. We're happy to note that, Colin. We're happy to take that on board, yeah. Eleanor McIntosh.
Yeah, just following on from that, is that conditioned then within the CEMP condition, or should it not be conditioned?
No, so the Construction Environmental Management Plan will incorporate, because the impacts on freshwater pearl mussels or any of the protected species with this application are anticipated to be through that construction process. The Construction Environmental Management Plan is the mechanism for capturing these mitigations. So you wouldn't have a standalone survey, or you wouldn't have a standalone condition, sorry. You have one condition that requires the Construction Environmental Management Plan to be submitted to our satisfaction. And to satisfy us, it will absolutely have to include all these, and I will be consulting with our ecological advisor before approving any Construction Environmental Management Plan.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Any other questions, members? John Kirk.
You did say that you know, that all this work is not really going to have much benefit to the flood height, the level of the water. What is the real benefit?
That's what the modelling showed. I'm not a flood modeller. The model was worked out by the authorities, flooding consultants, and agreed. The results agreed with SEPA. I think it's not the driving force. This isn't a flood prevention scheme. It's about habitat connectivity and creation and betterment, essentially.
Pete Cosgrove.
Yeah, the impounded area, if managed in a beneficial way, will be extremely important for breeding salmon in particular. It's just not very good for that at the moment, and the adjacent area is pretty good for waders too. And if we can have permanent water, it'll be wetter, and that'll likely create the habitats for wader chicks, which require wet edges. And so, I think it would benefit quite a range of species, to be honest.
Okay, thank you, members. Any other questions for Colin? Okay, with that, we'll move to debate. Anyone like to add anything? Okay, if there's nothing else to add, I'm happy to move the recommendation. Is anyone otherwise minded? Okay, well, based on that, the application is approved, subject to conditions. Thank you very much. Thank you, Colin. Item 6 is AOCB. I'm not aware of any AOCB? Oh, better get the convener back in, indeed. We won't do a round of applause for you, Sandy. We'll just let you take your seat. Sandy Bremner has now rejoined us in the room. So item 6, not aware of any AOCB. Do any members have any AOCB? Okay, with that, the date of the next meeting is the 29th of August 2025. And I'd just like to thank all staff for setting us up here today. I know that's logistically quite challenging, so thank you very much for that. And all officers for their presentations, and all members for their attendance here today. And please enjoy your summer holidays, and we'll see you in August.